The old diner on Wilshire Boulevard had been a neighborhood fixture for nearly 30 years. Its neon sign flickered day and night, a beacon for locals seeking comfort food and friendly faces. But times had been tough lately. Rising rent, competition from trendy new restaurants, and the economic downturn had pushed the beloved establishment to the brink of closure. Keanu Reeves had spotted the final week sign while driving to a film set one rainy morning. Something about the place caught his eye, perhaps the elderly couple sharing breakfast by the window, or the group of nurses enjoying coffee after their night shift. Whatever it was, he couldn't get the image out of his mind. 3 days later, the diner's owner, Mrs. Chen, received a call from a lawyer representing an anonymous investor. The mysterious benefactor wanted to save the diner, but had one unusual condition. Their identity would remain completely secret. The staff could keep their jobs, the menu would stay the same, and Mrs. Chen would continue managing day-to-day operations. The only change was an increase in employee benefits and a modest renovation budget. "It's like something from a movie," Mrs. Chen told her husband that night, studying the contract with disbelief. Who does something like this without wanting recognition? The diner was saved, much to the relief of its loyal customers and dedicated staff. Rumors spread throughout the neighborhood about who the mysterious investor might be. Some guessed it was a wealthy regular customer. Others thought perhaps a former employee who'd struck it rich. No one suspected it might be the famously kind Hollywood actor who occasionally made headlines for his quiet acts of generosity. For 3 months, Keanu kept his distance, receiving only basic financial reports from Mrs. Chen through his lawyer. He smiled whenever he drove past and saw the parking lot full again. Sometimes he'd slow down just enough to glimpse the warm glow through the windows, satisfied to know the little community hub was thriving. But curiosity eventually got the better of him. What was the place really like inside? Were the employees happy? Did the food taste as good as the online reviews claimed? One Tuesday afternoon, between filming sessions for his latest movie, he decided it was time to find out. In his trailer, Keanu changed from his costume into everyday clothes, worn jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a dark blue jacket. He added a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and simple glasses with clear frames, his usual disguise when he wanted to move through the world unnoticed. It wasn't elaborate, but it worked surprisingly well. People tended to see what they expected to see, and nobody expected to find Keanu Reeves ordering a sandwich at a neighborhood diner. "Taking a long lunch?" asked his co-star as Keanu headed toward his motorcycle. "Something like that," he replied with a smile. "Just need to check on an investment." The ride to the diner took 15 minutes. Keanu parked his motorcycle a block away and walked the rest of the distance, observing the neighborhood as he went. It was a genuine mix of people, families, workers, students, the kind of diverse community he'd grown to appreciate in his years living in Los Angeles. As he approached the diner, he noticed the fresh paint on the trim and the new planters flanking the entrance, small improvements that made a big difference. The neon sign had been repaired too, no longer flickering but glowing steadily against the afternoon sky. Through the windows, he could see that the place was busy, booths filled with customers enjoying late lunches. A small smile formed on his lips. His investment was doing well. But the real test would be inside, where the heart of any restaurant truly lived, in its atmosphere, its food, and most importantly, its people. Taking a deep breath, Keanu pushed open the door and stepped inside, just another hungry customer looking for a good meal. Little did he know that this simple visit would lead to a moment that would stop him in his tracks and remind him why small acts of kindness were always worth the effort. Keanu finished his sandwich and coffee, leaving a generous tip tucked under his plate. He needed some quiet space to think about everything he'd heard. Finding an empty booth in the corner, he settled in with his phone, appearing to check messages while his mind worked through a plan. The elderly customer the cashiers were worried about, Mr. Peterson, weighed on his thoughts. An old man living alone, missing his regular breakfast routine for a week. It didn't sound good. And yet 2 young diner employees cared enough to check on him after their shift, delaying their own commutes home. That level of compassion deserved support. From his booth, Keanu could see Mrs. Chen moving efficiently around the diner, stopping occasionally to chat with regulars. She had a quiet dignity about her, the pride of a small business owner who treated her establishment as an extension of her home. She was the heart of this place, and she'd chosen good people to work alongside her. He watched as Tina helped an elderly woman with a walker get settled at a table, pulling out a chair for her companion and taking time to write down their order, even though the woman spoke slowly, searching for words. There was no impatience, no hurry, just genuine care. At the register, Bobby was explaining the daily specials to a teenager who looked like he might not have enough money for a full meal. Keanu couldn't hear what was said, but he saw Bobby point to something on the menu that made the kid's face brighten with relief. Small moments of kindness happening all around him. This wasn't just good customer service, this was community in action. Keanu pulled up his banking app and made a few discreet taps on his screen. Then he opened his Notes app and started typing ideas, forming a plan. If he was going to help, it needed to be anonymous. No grand gestures that might reveal his identity or make people feel uncomfortable. Just quiet support that would seem like good fortune rather than charity. First, the elderly customer they were worried about. A quick call to his lawyer could arrange for a wellness check from a home healthcare service. They could simply say they were from a new community outreach program, checking on seniors in the neighborhood. Then there was Tina's college fund, an anonymous scholarship that happened to match her exact career goals. That could work. And for the dishwasher studying for his GED, maybe some free tutoring services could appear at just the right time. The single mother whose child needed glasses, that was trickier. Too direct, and it would seem suspicious. But perhaps a general health and wellness fund for diner employees and their families. That could cover a lot of needs without singling anyone out. As for the diner itself, Keanu had ideas for subtle improvements that wouldn't change its essential character. Better chairs for the elderly customers. A small ramp at the side entrance for those with mobility issues. Energy-efficient appliances to reduce Mrs. Chen's utility bills. He made notes on all of these, careful to keep his phone angled away from curious eyes. To anyone watching, he was just another customer finishing his meal, maybe catching up on work emails. But inside, Keanu felt more energized than he had in months. His career had given him wealth and fame beyond what he ever expected. Using some of that good fortune to help this little corner of the world felt right in a way that was hard to describe. A young family entered the diner, the parents looking tired but the children bubbling with excitement. Mrs. Chen greeted them warmly, leading them to a booth where booster seats already waited for the little ones. She seemed to know exactly what they needed before they asked. Watching this simple interaction, Keanu made one more note on his phone. A college fund for Mrs. Chen's employees' children. Something that would grow over time, giving these hardworking people one less thing to worry about as they raised their families. He finished his coffee and slid out of the booth, leaving another tip on the table even though it wasn't necessary. As he walked toward the door, he caught snippets of conversation from the tables he passed. Birthday plans, work stories, friendly debates about sports teams. The ordinary tapestry of life, being woven one meal at a time in this unassuming place with its flickering neon sign. Near the exit, he paused by a community bulletin board covered with flyers for local events, lost pets, and neighborhood services. An idea struck him, and he quickly snapped a photo of the board with his phone. Another note to add to his growing list, support for these small community initiatives. Bobby looked up from the register and gave him a casual nod. "Hope you enjoyed your meal, sir." "Best sandwich I've had in a long time," Keanu replied truthfully, his voice low and ordinary. "I'll definitely be back." "We'll be here," Bobby said with a genuine smile, having no idea who he was speaking to. As Keanu pushed open the door, the little bell above it jingled cheerfully. He stepped out into the afternoon sunshine feeling lighter somehow, despite the weight of the new responsibilities he'd taken on. This wasn't the kind of role he usually played, silent benefactor instead of action hero. But it felt more real than any character he portrayed on screen. His motorcycle waited a block away, but Keanu took his time walking, looking more carefully at the neighborhood around the diner. The laundromat with its faded sign. The small bookstore that somehow survived in the age of online shopping. The community garden wedged between buildings, where an elderly man was patiently teaching children how to plant tomatoes. All of these places were connected, creating an ecosystem of human interaction that was becoming increasingly rare in a digital world. The diner wasn't just a place to eat. It was a hub that strengthened all these connections. As he reached his motorcycle and put on his helmet, Keanu made a promise to himself. The help he planned to give would remain anonymous, but he would return to the diner, not just once, but regularly. Not as a celebrity or an investor, but as a customer. As part of this community he'd unexpectedly joined. Because some things were worth more than money or fame. Some things were worth protecting simply because they made the world a little kinder, a little more human. And that, Keanu thought as he started his motorcycle, was a role worth playing for a very long time. 3 months flew by since Keanu had saved the diner. On a crisp autumn morning, he found himself with a rare day off. The movie he'd been filming was taking a break while the director flew to New York for a family emergency. Keanu sat in his living room, flipping through a dog-eared script for his next project, but his mind kept wandering. Maybe today's the day, he said to himself, setting the script aside and looking out the window at the clear blue sky. He'd been curious about the diner for weeks now, wondering how his investment was doing beyond the neat financial reports his lawyer forwarded each month. Keanu walked to his closet and pulled out what his friends jokingly called his invisibility cloak, a well-worn baseball cap from a charity marathon he'd run years ago, a pair of non-prescription glasses with clear frames, and his most ordinary clothes. He chose faded jeans with a small tear near the knee, a plain black t-shirt, and an old navy jacket that had seen better days. Standing in front of the mirror, he rubbed a hand across the stubble on his jaw. Perfect, just scruffy enough to look like any other guy who hadn't bothered to shave on his day off. He smiled at his reflection, always amazed at how such simple changes could help him blend into a crowd. Fame was strange that way. People expected celebrities to look like their movie posters, not like regular folks getting lunch. Just another Tuesday, he reminded himself. It was a phrase he often used when trying to stay grounded in the sometimes surreal world of Hollywood. The ride to the diner was pleasant, his motorcycle humming beneath him as he weaved through the late morning traffic. Los Angeles showed its better side today, palm trees swaying in the gentle breeze, mountains visible in the distance thanks to the recent rain that had cleared the smog. Keanu parked a block away from the diner, not wanting to attract attention with his bike. As he walked, he noticed little improvements in the neighborhood, a fresh mural on the side of the laundromat, new benches at the bus stop, planters filled with bright flowers. The diner seemed to have sparked some renewed pride in the area. A small line had formed outside the entrance, a good sign for business. Keanu took his place at the end, pulling his cap lower and slouching slightly. The woman in front of him was talking animatedly on her phone about a job interview she'd just aced. Behind him, a grandfather was teaching his young grandson how to tie a shoelace. These everyday moments, invisible to most, were the things Keanu treasured about stepping out of the Hollywood bubble. When he finally reached the door, the smells hit him first: sizzling bacon, fresh coffee, something sweet baking in the oven. The diner looked better than he remembered from peering through the windows that rainy day months ago. The booths had been reupholstered in a warm red vinyl, the counter gleamed, and someone had added vintage photographs of the neighborhood on the walls. More importantly, the place buzzed with life. Every table was full, with a diverse mix of people: office workers on lunch break, students with laptops, elderly couples lingering over coffee, families with children coloring on paper placemats. The background noise was that perfect blend of conversation, clinking dishes, and occasional laughter that made a place feel welcoming. Keanu joined the line at the counter, keeping his posture relaxed and unremarkable. He studied the menu board while secretly observing the staff. They moved with purpose and energy, none of the wariness he often saw in struggling businesses. Mrs. Chen was at the register, her smile genuine as she handed change to a customer. 2 young cashiers worked alongside her, a guy with glasses and a woman with curly hair tied back in a bandana. As the line inched forward, Keanu caught snippets of conversation around him. 2 regulars discussing a local baseball game. A nurse from the nearby hospital recommending the daily special to her colleague. A college student asking if the Wi-Fi password had changed. This wasn't just a place to eat, it was a community hub, exactly what he hoped to preserve. When his turn came, Keanu stepped up to the counter where the young woman with the bandana was waiting. He kept his voice casual, gaze focused mostly on the menu rather than making direct eye contact. "Just a turkey sandwich and black coffee, please," he said, fishing in his pocket for his wallet. "For here or to go?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. "For here," Keanu replied, handing over a $20 bill. As she made change, Keanu noticed a small photo taped to the register. The diner staff all smiling together in front of the building. A little paper heart had been drawn around it. That small detail told him everything he needed to know about how the employees felt about their workplace. 3 days passed in a blur of filming for Keanu. Between scenes, he made phone calls and sent emails, setting his plan in motion with the help of his lawyer and financial advisor. They were used to his charitable requests by now, though they seemed particularly intrigued by his specific interest in a small neighborhood diner. "Just make sure it stays anonymous," he reminded them repeatedly. "No press, no recognition, no trail leading back to me." On the 4th morning, Keanu woke up early, made coffee, and opened his laptop. A news alert appeared immediately. A small article from a local community website. Anonymous donor provides healthcare checkups for elderly residents. He smiled, reading how a new community outreach program had launched, offering free wellness visits to seniors living alone in the neighborhood. The article mentioned that one such visit had potentially saved a life. An elderly man named Peterson had fallen in his apartment and was unable to reach his phone. The wellness team had found him, gotten him medical attention, and he was now recovering in the hospital. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, a wave of gratitude washing over him. His timing had been perfect. The healthcare service he'd anonymously funded had reached Mr. Peterson in time. Later that afternoon, between filming scenes for his new movie, Keanu received a text from his lawyer. "Package delivered to diner as requested." Owner quite surprised. The package contained a letter and several envelopes. The letter simply stated that an anonymous benefactor wished to express appreciation for the diner's role in the community. Each envelope held something different: an employee appreciation bonus for every staff member, funding for a health and wellness program for employees and their families, and information on a new educational scholarship available to any diner employee pursuing higher education. A separate envelope, marked Community Support, contained funds specifically designated for helping customers in need, whether covering meals for those short on cash or supporting local initiatives posted on the diner's bulletin board. Keanu had been careful with the wording, making it all sound like the work of a local business group rather than an individual. Nothing flashy or excessive, just enough to make life a little easier for the people who made the diner special. 1 week later, wearing his usual disguise, Keanu returned to the diner. He parked his motorcycle a block away and walked slowly, noticing small changes in the neighborhood: fresh flowers in the community garden, a new bench at the bus stop, the laundromat sporting a freshly painted sign. The bell jingled as he pushed open the diner door. The lunch crowd was in full swing, every booth occupied and a line at the counter. The atmosphere felt even warmer than before, an undercurrent of excitement running through the usual friendly buzz. Keanu took a spot at the end of the line, keeping his cap low but taking everything in. Near the register, a small chalkboard had appeared: "Pay it forward. 5 meals available today for anyone in need." As he watched, a construction worker quietly added to the tally, paying for both his own lunch and another meal for a future customer who might be short on funds. When he reached the counter, he found Tina and Bobby working side by side, moving efficiently but still taking time to chat with each customer. They both wore small pins on their uniforms, a simple blue heart. Looking around, Keanu noticed all the staff have the same pin. "What can I get you today?" Tina asked brightly, not recognizing him from his previous visit. "Turkey sandwich and black coffee, please," he replied, keeping his voice casual. "Good choice," she smiled, ringing up his order. "The bread's fresh baked this morning." As he paid, Keanu noticed a colorful brochure by the register: "Chen's Diner Scholarship Program, because our community believes in you." Beside it was a small donation jar for the elderly customer wellness checks. "Your coffee's ready now," Bobby said, sliding a mug across the counter. "Sandwich will be up in about 5 minutes. Feel free to take any open seat." Keanu found a small table near the window and sipped his coffee, watching the busy diner with quiet satisfaction. On the wall behind the counter, a new photo had been added to the collection: Mr. Peterson in a hospital bed, smiling weakly but giving a thumbs up, surrounded by diner staff bringing him his favorite breakfast. Mrs. Chen moved through the tables, stopping to chat with customers and check on her staff. There was a new lightness to her step, a brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she passed near his table, Keanu heard her telling a regular customer about the mysterious package that had arrived. "Like something from a movie," she said, shaking her head in wonder. "We still don't know who it was. The lawyer wouldn't say anything except that someone appreciated what we do here." Keanu hid his smile behind his coffee mug. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. Help that felt like recognition rather than charity, support that strengthened what was already good rather than changing it. Near the kitchen, he spotted Tina showing a new brochure to one of the cooks, the college program information. Her face glowed with excitement as she pointed to something on the page. The cook gave her a high five, both of them looking like people who suddenly saw new possibilities in their future. At another table, Bobby was kneeling beside an elderly woman's chair, helping her fill out a form for the wellness check program. His patience as she slowly wrote each letter, his gentle encouragement, these were not things that could be trained or mandated. They came from a genuine care for others that seemed to flow naturally in this place. Keanu's sandwich arrived, delivered by a smiling server who wished him a good day before hurrying off to her next table. As he ate, he realized he felt something that had been missing from his life, despite all his success, a simple connection to everyday humanity, to ordinary kindness and community. In his career, he'd played heroes who saved the world through extraordinary actions. But here in this diner, he was witnessing a different kind of heroism, the kind that existed in small daily choices to be kind, to care, to make others feel valued. His enormous gifts had made a difference, yes, but the true beauty was that they had simply watered seeds that were already there, already growing in the fertile soil of this ordinary place with its flickering neon sign and homemade pies. As he finished his meal and prepared to leave, Keanu made another silent promise to himself. He would return to this diner again and again, not as a celebrity, not as a benefactor, but simply as one more person in a community of people who looked out for each other. Because sometimes the most extraordinary thing a person could do was simply to recognize and nurture the good that already existed in the ordinary world. And that, he thought as he left a generous tip and headed for the door, was a role he was honored to play. Little did he know that what he was about to overhear would change everything. The line moved quickly, and before Keanu knew it, he was standing at the counter. The young woman with curly hair tucked behind a bandana smiled at him, a name tag reading Tina. Next to her worked a tall guy with glasses and a short beard, his tag showing Bobby. "What can I get for you today?" Tina asked, her voice warm and genuine. She didn't seem rushed despite the lunch crowd building behind Keanu. "Turkey sandwich and black coffee, please," he replied, keeping his voice casual and his cap pulled low. He handed over a $20 bill, careful to avoid too much eye contact. Bobby was already preparing someone else's order, moving with practiced efficiency behind the counter. "Mrs. Chen, we're running low on the homemade pickles," he called over his shoulder to an older woman who was wiping down a recently vacated table. "Already getting more from the back," she answered with a thumbs up. Keanu noticed how smoothly they all worked together, like a well-rehearsed dance. There was none of the tension he often saw in struggling restaurants, where financial stress trickled down to the staff. Instead, the atmosphere felt light despite the busy rush. Tina handed him his change and a number for his table. "Coffee's ready now if you'd like to take it with you. The sandwich will be out in about 10 minutes. "Thanks," Keanu said with a nod, accepting the steaming mug. He found an empty spot at the counter rather than taking a booth. From here, he could observe the entire diner while appearing to be just another customer scrolling through his phone. The coffee was excellent, rich and fresh without being bitter. He watched as Mrs. Chen moved from table to table, checking on customers with genuine interest. She knew many by name, asking about children or jobs or recent vacations. This wasn't the forced friendliness of chain restaurants. It was the real connection of a neighborhood gathering place. Keanu's attention drifted back to the two cashiers as they worked side by side. Bobby was telling Tina about his night class in computer programming, how he'd hoped to develop apps someday, but wanted to keep working at the diner part-time because he loved the people. "That's the dream, right?" Tina replied. "Finding work that pays the bills but doesn't drain your soul." She lowered her voice. "I'm so glad this place stayed open. I was already applying at that burger chain when we got the news." Keanu sipped his coffee, feeling a quiet satisfaction. This was exactly why he'd made the investment, to preserve not just jobs but good jobs where people felt valued. A young mother approached the counter with a toddler balanced on her hip. Before she could even speak, Tina was already reaching for a clean sippy cup. "The usual for little Max? Apple juice, not too cold." The woman's tired face broke into a relieved smile. "You remembered. Thank you." "Of course we remember our best customer," Bobby chimed in, making a silly face at the child who giggled in response. "He's the only one who gives honest reviews of my pancake art." As they chatted, Keanu noticed how neither Tina nor Bobby rushed the interaction despite the growing line. They understood something many businesses forgot, that these small moments of connection were as important as efficiency. A server approached with his sandwich, placing it in front of him with a friendly nod. The presentation was simple but appetizing: fresh bread, generous filling, a pickle spear on the side. He took a bite and was pleasantly surprised. The turkey was real roasted meat, not processed deli slices, and the bread had a homemade quality that chain restaurants could never replicate. As he ate, Keanu continued to observe. The diverse crowd of customers reflected the neighborhood: an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner booth, a group of construction workers refueling before heading back to a nearby job site, a pair of teachers grading papers between bites of salad. Everyone seemed comfortable here, like they belonged. His attention was drawn back to Tina and Bobby when he had concern in their voices. They had moved slightly away from the main counter area during a brief lull in customers, speaking in lower tones that Keanu could just make out. "I'm worried about Mr. P," Tina was saying, arranging clean silverware into neat bundles. "He hasn't been in for his usual breakfast all week." Bobby nodded, his expression serious behind his glasses. "Tuesday through Sunday, 7:15 on the dot, 2 eggs over easy and wheat toast. Never misses a day." "He mentioned his hip was bothering him last time," Tina continued. "What if he fell and couldn't reach the phone? You know he lives alone since his wife passed." Keanu slowed his chewing, listening more intently now. The genuine concern in their voices caught him off guard. They weren't just talking about a customer. They were talking about someone they cared about. "Maybe we should check on him after our shift," Bobby suggested, lowering his voice further. "His apartment's on Pine Street, not far from the bus stop." "I was thinking the same thing," Tina agreed. "I don't mind being a little late getting home." Keanu put down his sandwich, suddenly feeling like he was witnessing something special. These 2 young people, likely earning modest wages, were willing to delay their own commutes home to check on an elderly regular customer. It wasn't their job or responsibility, it was simple human kindness. He reached for his coffee, his mind turning over what he'd just heard, unaware that what would come next would affect him even more deeply. Keanu sipped his coffee slowly, watching the bustling diner over the rim of his mug. The sandwich arrived, looking much better than he'd expected: thick slices of real roasted turkey, not the processed kind, with fresh vegetables on bread that had clearly been baked that morning. He took a bite and nodded with satisfaction. The food quality matched the warm atmosphere. As he ate, he kept his ears tuned to the conversation between Tina and Bobby at the counter. They had moved into a rhythm during the lunch rush, taking orders, making change, calling out to the kitchen staff, all while maintaining genuine connections with customers. No robotic greetings or forced smiles here. "Your usual, Mr. Wong?" Bobby asked an elderly man who approached with a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Tea with honey and the vegetable soup." "You know me too well," the old man chuckled, his eyes crinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "How's that night class going? Still learning to make those computer games?" "Programming apps, not games," Bobby corrected with a good-natured smile. "And yes, slowly but surely. I'll design something for the diner one day, maybe a loyalty program or online ordering system." "Just don't make it too complicated for us old folks," Mr. Wong replied, patting his pocket. "I still carry a flip phone, you know." This kind of easy back and forth happened repeatedly. Tina remembering a college student's coffee preference without being asked, Bobby inquiring about a young mother's new baby, both of them treating each person like a welcomed friend rather than just another transaction. Keanu found himself smiling behind his sandwich. This was exactly the kind of place worth preserving. The lunchtime crowd began to thin out gradually. Keanu was in no hurry, nursing his coffee and observing. He'd become good at people watching over the years, a skill that helped both with his privacy and his acting. Understanding how real people moved through the world, their small gestures and habits informed his performances in ways no acting class could teach. His attention was drawn back to Tina and Bobby when their conversation shifted to a topic that seemed to worry them both. "It's been a whole week now," Tina said, her voice dropping as she wiped down the counter near where Keanu sat. "Mr. Peterson always comes in for breakfast, Tuesday through Sunday, 7:15 on the dot. Never misses." Bobby nodded, concern evident in his expression. "2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter, just a little jam on the side. Coffee with 1 sugar, no cream." "The last time he was here, he mentioned his hip was acting up again," Tina continued, absent-mindedly rearranging the sugar packets. "What if he fell at home and couldn't reach the phone? You know he lives alone since Mrs. Peterson passed last year." Keanu slowed his chewing, finding himself genuinely interested in their concern. They weren't just casually noting a customer's absence, they were genuinely worried about this man's well-being. "Maybe we should swing by his place after our shift," Bobby suggested, lowering his voice further. "His apartment's on Pine Street, I think, not too far from my bus stop." "I was thinking the same thing," Tina agreed. "I don't mind being a bit late getting home if it means making sure he's okay." Bobby glanced at his watch. "We both get off at 4. It would only take a few minutes to check. If he's fine, great. If not," he didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. "Better safe than sorry," Tina nodded. "Mrs. Chen would understand if we clock out a few minutes late." As they moved away to serve other customers, Keanu sat very still, his sandwich forgotten. He was struck by the simple humanity of their exchange. These 2 young people, likely earning modest wages, were willing to delay their own commutes home to check on an elderly customer they were worried about. It wasn't their job, nobody was asking them to do it, and they wouldn't get paid extra for their time. The world often focused on grand gestures of kindness, celebrities donating millions to causes, huge charity galas, dramatic rescues. But here was something different, something just as valuable, quiet, everyday compassion that happened without fanfare or recognition. The kind that formed the invisible threads holding communities together. Keanu took another sip of coffee, turning this over in his mind. In his career, he'd played heroes who saved the world in spectacular fashion. But real heroism often looked more like this: 2 diner employees checking on an old man because they noticed his absence and cared enough to worry. He was so caught up in these thoughts that he almost missed the next part of their conversation when they returned to the counter area. Tina was refilling salt shakers while Bobby restocked napkins in the dispensers. "Speaking of things that never change," Bobby said with a small smile, "remember a year ago when we thought this place was closing for good? The final week sign in the window. I was already applying at that burger joint on 8th Street. You, don't remind me," Tina groaned. "I was looking at retail jobs at the mall. Can you imagine me folding sweaters all day instead of being here?" "And then the miracle happened," Bobby said, glancing around the busy diner. "Mystery investor swoops in, saves the day, keeps everything the same but somehow better. No corporate makeover, no menu changes, just life goes on." "I still wonder who it was," Tina mused, her voice dropping even further. Keanu leaned in slightly, pretending to focus on his sandwich while straining to hear. This was what he'd been curious about, how the staff viewed the ownership change. "Whoever they are," Bobby continued, "they're not just in it for the money. Did you notice how our health insurance got better? And the renovation budget? Who does that for a small diner that was barely breaking even?" "I don't know," Tina replied, "but I'm grateful every day. This place is special. It's more than just a job." Keanu's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips as he listened. He hadn't expected his investment to mean quite so much to the people working here. Something warm spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the hot coffee. Keanu was halfway through his sandwich when the conversation between the 2 cashiers took an unexpected turn. He had been enjoying his meal while casually observing the diner, but what he heard next made him stop mid-bite. "I still wonder who saved this place," Tina said, leaning against the counter during a brief lull in customers. She was folding napkins into neat triangles, her fingers moving with practiced ease. Mrs. Chen never talks about the investor. Probably some business group that saw potential in the location, Bobby replied, wiping down the coffee machine. Though it's weird they didn't change anything. Usually investors want to put their stamp on things, you know. New menu, new decor, new uniforms. That's what makes it so strange, Tina agreed. Whoever it is, they didn't just save a building or a business. They saved our little community. Keanu lowered his sandwich slowly, his full attention now on their conversation. You know what Mrs. Chen told me? Bobby said, lowering his voice. The investor specifically requested that all employees keep their jobs and get better healthcare. Who does that? Someone who understands this isn't just a place to eat, Tina replied, gesturing around the diner. Look at everyone here. Mr. Wong reading his newspaper in the same booth he's sat in for 15 years. Those nurses from the hospital who come in after their night shift. The students from the community college who study here because we don't rush them out. Bobby nodded, his expression thoughtful. Remember last month when that old guy, what's his name? The retired teacher came in and was short on cash. Mr. Dawson, Tina supplied. His social security check was late. Yeah, Mrs. Chen told us to give him his meals on the house until the check came through. Said the new investor would understand that it was the right thing to do. Keanu felt something warm spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. He'd made the investment on impulse, seeing a neighborhood place that needed saving. He hadn't expected it to mean so much to so many people. That's why I used some of my tip money to help Lisa's kid last week, Tina confessed, arranging sugar packets in their container. You know she's a single mom, and her boy needed new glasses for school. We're doing okay now with the better wages, so I figured, pay it forward, right? You did that. Bobby looked impressed. That's really cool. I've been tutoring one of the dishwashers in math. He's trying to get his GED. Keanu set his coffee mug down carefully, trying not to make a sound that might interrupt them. These two young people weren't just grateful for their jobs, they were extending the kindness they'd received to others. The ripple effect of his anonymous investment was far greater than he'd imagined. Sometimes I think about how close we came to losing all this, Tina continued, her gaze sweeping across the busy diner. I was already looking at other jobs, thinking about how I'd miss everyone. Me too, Bobby admitted. Nothing else would have been the same. Fast food places don't let you get to know the customers like family. Or let you start a college fund with your tips, Tina added with a small smile. You're saving for college. Bobby looked surprised. Just started. Taking it slow, but yeah. Figure I might try for that nursing degree eventually. The new healthcare plan actually inspired me. Made me realize I'm good with people, you know. Keanu felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. He'd been rich and famous for so long that sometimes he forgot how much difference even small changes could make in someone's life. Better healthcare leading to bigger dreams. Job security creating enough stability for someone to help others. The thought humbled him. A sudden rush of new customers interrupted the cashier's conversation as the door swung open, bringing in a group of office workers. Tina and Bobby immediately shifted back into their professional mode, greeting people with genuine smiles and working in perfect sync. Keanu watched them, feeling a strange mixture of pride and wonder. His simple financial investment had preserved something precious, not just brick and mortar, but a place where human connection flourished, where people looked out for each other without being asked, where kindness passed from person to person like a candle lighting other candles without diminishing its own flame. He took another bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly as he considered what he'd heard. In his career, he played many heroes who saved the world in dramatic fashion. But this quiet, behind-the-scenes rescue of one neighborhood diner suddenly felt more meaningful than any of those fictional exploits. Mrs. Chen emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of freshly baked cookies. She placed them in the display case, arranging them carefully before looking up to survey her domain. Her eyes moved from table to table, her expression one of quiet satisfaction as she took in the buzz of conversation, the sound of laughter, the simple pleasure of people enjoying food and company. For a moment, her gaze passed over Keanu without recognition, then moved on to greet a regular customer with a warm smile. Her pride in this place was evident in every movement, every interaction. Keanu finished the last of his coffee, his mind already forming a plan. These people would never know who he was or why he'd chosen to save their diner. And that was exactly how he wanted it. The joy was in watching from a distance, in knowing he'd helped preserve something authentic in a world that too often valued flash over substance. But perhaps there was more he could do, ways to support the community that had formed around this unassuming place with its neon sign and homemade pies. The elderly customer they were worried about, the single mother whose child needed glasses, the dishwasher studying for his GED, Tana's college dreams. He placed his mug down and signaled for the check, his mind turning over possibilities. Whatever he did next would remain anonymous, just another small miracle that no one could quite explain. And that thought made him smile as he reached for his wallet.